this house believes that social media companies should be held legally responsible for the spread of fake news. Yes, you know, there, and I ask you just to tell me when your speech is started. 3, 2, 1, please.
The speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Good morning, judges. Good morning, opposition. I'm the first speaker of the proposition team, and today we're gonna debate on this motion. And first of all, I would like to give you some definitions. And the first one is social media companies. Those companies are, for example, like Instagram, Facebook, and also X. And as regards the legally responsible part of the motion, we must face those consequences that our actions has, and which must be under a legal system. So this is a very important part of our debate. And last but not least, I would like to talk about fake news. Fake news is a concept, and it is very different from freedom of speech. When we talk, we must pay attention to our words. And in fact, freedom of speech is one of our most important rights, and it's pretty different from fake news. And now I would like to give you a bit of a frame. And in fact, we have to say that in our world, in the world that we live nowadays, we have many problems. And the social media represent a daily routine for each of us. And that comes into contact with every person that is in this room. And we are going to analyze this motion from many point of views. One of those point of views is users or even countries. But this will be the work of our second team member, and so we can go talking about our team line. First of all, I'm going to talk about the informations, and my second teammate will talk about users and countries, which are point of views that we use to analyze the protection that we must have in our daily routine. And it represents our second argumentation. So let's go to talk about this information. So we live in a world full of information, and we must be under a strict control that must come from social media companies that must be responsible for the spread of fake news. So I want to underline that fake news are different from freedom of speech, which is one of our most important rights. And we can also talk about an important American sociologist which said that the medium is a message. So the medium is an important part of our daily routine. The telephone is different from the air. When we're talking with someone, where our words goes to the ear of the other person through the air. And when we're talking with our friends that are far away from us, we're talking through our telephone, Instagram, TikTok, our medium. And when we want to express ourselves, we choose how to do that. And the most important way to do that. And for that reason, the apps that we use must be under a strict control. And is fundamental because information are made up by a concept that we have in our mind, in addition to the medium that we have in that precise moment. And Instagram and all those medium must be under a strict control. So when we're talking about fake news, we also must say that the part of those companies, they are already under strict control. But this is just up to ideas in many cases. When we are talking about a legal responsibility, in many aspects, like Instagram is not under a strict control. So we must pay attention to those legal aspects. And so I would like just to give you also... Yeah?
Don't you think that strict legal responsibility would just lead to censorship?
What?
Don't you think it would just lead to censorship?
Censorship?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but I already said that they must be under strict control, and but it's different from freedom of speech. We are freedom to say whatever we want to say, but this is not talking about fake news. Those are different things. So when we're talking about the freedom of speech, we are talking about a thing. If we're talking about fake news, it's completely another aspect. Because if I'm speaking the truth, I know that I'm in a good part. While if I'm talking about something that is incorrect or is in some cases even bad for someone else, it is not right to do that. And this is also up to our morality, but we know that it is subject. So there must be some legal aspects that confirms something of the legal part of Instagram and those apps that we use daily. So going back to those 2 points of views that that our team wanted to analyze, I would like just to start giving you some information about the users and about the countries. When we are talking about users, we are talking about single persons, a single person that have the power of destroy thousands of lives with just one sentence. But you will see that in our second speech. And so I want to underline that our team has made a difference between fake news and freedom of speech, and the informations that goes into those companies, those realities that we are living, must be under a strict control. Thank you for your attention.
7 minutes. Okay, your time is 7 minutes and 36 seconds. Just wait for 10 minutes. Okay, so whenever you want, you can start. This is your place, and the green one is for the composition.
Is it okay if it goes too secure?
Yes, no problem.
Can I just go together? I always work too much, so like that kind of becomes a problem. I'm so sorry. Okay. My speech will start. Okay, quick. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1.
Every action compels a consequent reaction. But if I'm not the one acting, why should I be the one suffering the consequences? So as first speaker of opposition, what can you expect from the speech? First, I'll read about what the first speaker of proposition said and do some clarification on framework and reframing the notion. Then, I will bring on our rest of the framework, our teamline, and later I will mechanize our first argument. So, let's start with rebuttal. The main that we get from proposition is that mediums must be controlled, and they already are. That's kind of all they push, but they didn't really mechanize why those mediums have to be controlled strictly through legally binding laws. What we try to believe and what we will answer to the point is that they have responsibility. They already have, and they already uphold this responsibility. But they shouldn't be a legal responsibility. That's the clue of the motion. That's the point of the motion. So the metric on which you should judge is, should they be legally responsible for the actions of their users? That's the point that we will mechanize for our arguments, that they should be legally responsible. So at this point, I would like to make some clarification of framework. First, fake news are not a precisely defined concept. Not all news are bluntly fake. In the status quo, not everything is like cows are flying or like donkeys have, I don't know, like things. So this comes from the fact that more often than not, news are political and polarizing because they talk about today's matters. They talk about what happens in the status quo. Facts that aren't resolved yet and are currently ongoing. Let's take an example of vaccines. They are generally recognized as a safe concept, but not everybody believes that they are actually a safe cure. At the same time, for example, let's take an example of news that recently came out on the major journals in America. So they found artificial light on approximately a planet close to us. The point is, even the New York Times posted about this. The point is that this news was discouraged to be published by NASA after, because it wasn't actually real. So even if big journals portray this news, why should social media companies that don't actually work on information, that's their not main scope, be held accountable legally for news that other people are bringing? For example, even think about vaccines. Even scientists do believe that in some cases vaccines are not safe. What do we say? This is a polarizing matter. What is the fake news? Is it the fake news is that they're safe, or is it the fact that they're not? The point is that there is no objective truth to grant what fake news are. Therefore, it's very difficult to understand when fake news should be banned and when fake news should be censored. Second, fake news aren't actually that easy to spot. Two reasons of this. First, because there are billions of posts made every day, so it means a lot of work to control everything and be sure that everything is in place. And second, some are subtle and require extensive knowledge on a topic. One wrong sentence, like one wrong data is fake news, but that doesn't mean that all the people checking were like, they didn't really think about how they would check it, but like, let's imagine people, AI, whatever, they would need so much data to be sure that everything is perfectly correct. Not even AI has the power to know everything. For example, because it has a limited memory, and because there's, again, no objective truth to like kind of check what is fake news and what is not. So, the third point of characterization is that social companies are already tackling the problem. For example, again, with AI and moderators on X, it's a social media that they already cited. So the fact that opposition believes that they shouldn't be and they aren't legally binded doesn't mean that they shouldn't still try to limit as much as possible blunt fake news. What we're saying is not protecting fake news. What we're saying is that they shouldn't be legally binded because it's not necessary. Especially because they are already trying in the status quo. They have incentives to do that. For example, they want to look reliable to attract customers. Having a clean platform that is not full of hate generated from polarizing news communicates to people that social media is a safe environment to spend your time. As they said, it is essential to attract new people and keep the ones that are already connected. Hate scares people away, especially on platforms like TikTok or Instagram. They're kind of meant more to like relax and like turn off your brain once you're tired. So at this point, I'd like to highlight what's going to be our team line. First, proposition policy risks of falling into censorship, and second, accountability should fall on the users. So our burden is proving to you that companies shouldn't be held accountable legally for the spread of fake news, because the negative impacts will be censorship and the reduction of confrontation, and because it will wrongfully shift the responsibility from users to companies. So at this point, let's start with our first argument. Proposition policies lead to censorship. We have two layers on this. First, companies fear, and second, authoritarian government censorship. Let's start with the first layer, fear. What are the groundings? First, as we already defined, fake news are a variable concept, and not every fake news is acknowledged as such by most people. And second, furthermore, legal costs are heavy and take time to companies to be resolved. In both words, company will be incentivized to find a solution that will reduce the number of lawsuits the most. So, how does opposition work the claim? Well, think about it. Would you let free information circulate with the risk of getting sued, or would you prefer to hide them all, just to be sure that nothing is going to happen, just nothing is going to create you problem? Probably the second one, and it is the reason that companies would make in proposition work. The fear of getting sued is going to be stronger than their willing of spread fair information, leading to an environment where every idea or news that is at least slightly controversial it's gonna be cancelled, because the economic damage of letting even one fake news out outweighs the willingness to let people have their freedom of speech. Yes.
Could you define the difference between something that's controversial and something that's fake? Because I think you are kind of overlapping those two.
But that's exactly the point. There is no clear distinction what is controversial and what is fake. The point is, if I can define it, if they can define it, if companies can define it, something might just be controversial, but at the risk of getting a lawsuit, it will just be deemed as fake, and therefore it will damage the freedom of speech. That's what we're pushing. So let's move on to the argument. So we care about freedom of speech because first, social medias are the place where you have confrontation, dialogue. So this would lose, they would lose the purpose of this confrontation. And second, censorship is extremely immoral. It limits discussion and blocks people awareness, limiting political and social engagement, a basic principle of democracy. Furthermore, it damages critical thinking, making the population numb to problems. Take, for example, the case of the United States of America when they invaded Iraq. At first, the United States of America heavily controlled information about what was happening in the country, pushing the narrative that atomic bombs were present in Iraq. And social media and news just portray this news of making Iraq look bad. But in the end, what happened is that Iraq didn't have any atomic bomb, and millions of people were killed just because the country had spread so much information and gained so much support from the international community for news that was just in their interest. This is extremely negative because people need to have access to free information to understand when a government is behaving authoritarianly and when a government is behaving instead of properly. So the point is give too much control to the legal system of what information is true and what information is fake. So you find the person in the government, I'm the person in the government. And I believe that, for example, my teammate, has done something wrong, I will cancel every information that is good about her, and I will make sure that what people will receive is just negative information, because I will deem that as fake news. Why can this happen? Because fake news aren't defined as a pretty strict concept. And for all these reasons, I'm so proud to oppose. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Your speech lasted 8 minutes, 10 seconds.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Hello everybody, I'm the second speaker of the proposition team, and at first I'd like to start by rebuttaling some of the things that were said by the first speaker of the opposition team. The first thing I wanted to underline is I think in this motion there has been a misunderstanding of the difference between controversial and what a fake news is. I tried to lift it up with the POI. I'm going to explain better what I meant by that. So there is a difference between an opinion and fake news. Fake news are quite easy to tackle. The opposition team has told you that fake news are not quite well defined, they can be quite definable, and so they can kind of fall into the category of something that's controversial, and so the censorship deal. Because of course, if I fear that something is controversial, it might not be entirely true, then that might lead to a censorship of this thing. But there's a difference between something that's controversial and something that's fake news. Fake news are quite well defined. Fake news is by definition a news that's fake. And fakeness is actually, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we already explained that easy fake news are already tackled by social media companies because they have the incentive to do so. Please, how are you changing this with legally binding laws?
We're not talking about legally binding laws in terms of creating a new legal system that might hold these social media companies accountable for their actions. It's just the simple fact that social media companies know that with their whole work of having global information that spreads at light speed and everybody could post anything that they want, they have this moral responsibility of preventing that from happening. Now, you mentioned specifically a more responsibility of these social media companies, but the truth is that these social media companies just acting on behalf of a moral responsibility couldn't really act on behalf of, right? That responsibility needs to be shifted and recategorized in a legal system in terms of if they do have a responsibility in terms of with social media comes all these different difficulties, then I need to take all these difficulties, and if they are faced, then there needs to be a legal action out towards on behalf of that. So to come back with my argumentations. So about the censorship, I don't really get why this is so relevant, because with the fact of controversial, when a fake news is fake, it can be fact-checked on many platforms. There are also agencies that work constantly onto defining what is true and what isn't true. Now, I think what the opposition team was trying to say is that when there's something that's controversial, something that can't quite be defined as true or false, then that could lead to censorship beforehand, because risking that controversial thing might end up being false, then this will, then this will lead to people thinking that the fake news has passed by social media companies. But the truth is that something that's controversial and that might be fake or true, that's an opinion. That's not a fact. Fake news are facts that can be fact-checked on whether true or false. Opinions, that is different. An opinion can be controversial in terms of an opinion. No, thank you. An opinion can be both true. An opinion can't quite be true or false. It's just opinions. It's all about points of views. There is no absolute truth or no absolute lie. Censorship lies in these things, because I want to censor when I want to force a specific opinion that's not true or false. It's just a specific opinion. And then that's where I censor when there's censorship, because I want to force this specific point of view. But again, that is a controversial opinion that could be interpreted in many different ways, in many different point of views. And then there's fake news, which are instead fact-checkable on whether they are absolutely true or absolutely false. There's this difference to be made. Also, no thank you, about censorship, the opposition team has given you some effects of this censorship. They mentioned limits information and damage critical thinking. Now, about limiting information, I've already told you that there's a difference between something that's an opinion and something that's a fact that can be checked. And then also damaging critical thinking. We believe that if these fake news are, the whole concept of making those social media companies responsible and accountable for the spreading of fake news is because if I am a user and if I log in and every news that I can see could either be true or false, because there's no legal guarantee that it will be true or false, then I won't believe in anything. My critical thinking is kind of compromised, because everything that I could see, everything that I could be exposed to could either be true or false, and I don't really have you mentioned TikTok and Instagram about brain rotting times of the day, right? When my brain is not completely locked in. So that's not when I'm going to have a critical thinking. Also, knowing that all the information that I could have could be either true or false, I'm not going to put the effort every single time into thinking, okay, I'm going to check if this is true or this is false. So this is actually the censorship which the opposition team has brought up is what actually damages critical thinking, but not the legal responsibility of social media companies of acting on behalf of the fake news and banning them from existing. I'll now move to my argumentations. The first argumentation that I'll present to you is principle of safety for the users. That's a principle that social media companies have to act on behalf of. They need to acknowledge their responsibility on a moral level, and then of course that responsibility needs to be brought and categorized into a legal system so that when it is not met, there have to be consequences so as to make those social media companies more aware and more attent in the way that they tackle these problematics. Because of course, if there's a legal action, they are going to be incentivized in pursuing more blockage of fake news, less spreading of fake news.
Right.
No, thank you. So, social media, as I was saying, needs to acknowledge the responsibility, first of all, for light speed info. Info comes at all the time, and it travels at a very light speed. And also the fact that it's too much info for a single user. So these two things combined together end up in info bombing, which is a single user is just faced with so many different information that it's harder to tackle which ones are true and which ones are false. And the truth is that this responsibility, the opposition team has told you that it falls on the user, but we as the proposition team want to show you, and I'm going to show you now, why that's actually a responsibility of the social media companies that have not prevented that from happening, not the single user's fault. And that is why, first of all, the info bombing, so many informations, I can't quite tackle which one is true, which one is false, it's not the user's fault, but also as brain-rotting moments of the life of the single individual, and also the lack of trust on the single information. There's no check-in if the source is real and if the news is real. Also, since it's worldwide spread, since, as we were saying before, it's light-speed information, also social medias are everlasting and never presented in any single state, then not everyone is going to be enough educated to have a critical thinking built up from this. I'll now move over to the third argumentation, which is actually just completing what we've said. I'm going to introduce it, and then the other speaker is going to finish it up. So this thing of users that are not sure of whether the information is true or false could end up in defamation and degradation. Degradation and defamation that could lead to a butterfly effect. One single fake news could trigger many, many reactions of the public opinion itself. That could damage national security, because of course nations do know what is going on and what's not. But what nations are really founded on is the public opinion. So if the public opinion thinks that there's something wrong, it gets motivated and it gets actioned when it's not. There's no need in the actual fact. I concluded my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. Your speech lasted 8 minutes, 29 seconds.
Everyone is ready?
No, I think so.
If you need a minute to catch up, are you?
Okay.
So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, I would like to start by rebutting what the proposition house said. The second speaker started by rebutting the difference between controversial opinions and fake news. but they said that an opinion is controversial and an opinion is not a fact. But what are opinions? Opinions are based on facts, and if the fact is it's fake, if there is a fake news and the opinion is based on a fake news, then the opinion will eventually actually be controversial. So the companies who see even a small, a slight percentage of the opinion that is based on fake news, even the opinions that seem a little bit controversial will be banned, and we can't afford that. Then they said that fake news are easy to spot and easy to understand. But if that would be the problem, if a user can easily spot a fake news, then why should we take legal action? Why is this a necessity? Why should we have the necessity to add a legal action if, as the second speaker said, fake news are easy to spot? But as my first speaker said in the framework, it's not that easy, because usually fake news are in a context that is realistic. So we as people, we know a part of the story, but we hear another part that we might actually don't know. It's the first time we're hearing it, and we can't easily spot that this is a fake news. Then she said that damages the critical content and our critical mind. But when we open social media like Instagram, TikTok, as the second speaker said, it's like a brain-rotting moment. You don't want to think, you just want to relax. But if you want to have a critical thinking, if you want to start to have an opinion on something and want to know the real truth, you will go to a journal, you will go to actually search for the news online. You won't just go on TikTok and search it, because we know as we were kids, they always tells us don't trust the internet, and that is something that is radicalized in our society, and probably won't just go away with having legal action, because this legal action, as my first speaker said, will lead just to more problems. We can't afford to not have critical thinking. We can't afford to not have a place to say our opinion just because there is a small risk that can be a fake news. Because let's say companies are kind of selfish. If they have the possibility to go into a process, a legal process, they will ban everything that we say that is even slightly controversial. And personally, we believe as the opposition house that we can't afford to do that. So we believe that users should be held accountable for what they post and believe. Then the second speaker also said that social media is responsible, but she also said because it's difficult to understand what is the fake news. But that's kind of in contrast to what she said in the beginning, because in the beginning she said that fake news are easy to spot, so they are different from controversial opinion. But then she said that they are difficult to spot, and that's why the companies are responsible. So as the opposition house, we don't want this kind of debate in the words, because we just had a definition and we will start with it. So then I would like to start to talk about my point, so the fact that users should be held accountable for what they post and believe. In social media, if you are at least 13 years old, you can create a profile. Social media users spread from teenagers to even elderly people. So they all are accountable for what they not just post, but like, comment, share, and actually believe. Social media platforms have a vast extent of content, like beauty creators, comedy skits, informational pages, etc. You can find everything on social media. When you log into your account, the algorithm of the social media will try to understand what kind of content you prefer based on your comments, your likes, and research, and most watch videos. So the social media algorithm can't be held accountable for what they show you and what appears on your For You page, on your social media page, because because the algorithm is based on your actions, so the user should be held accountable for, like you said, info bombing. Because if you are shown that you prefer to have like no thank you, to have you prefer to read the informational pages, then the social media will show you informational pages. So the user is actually held accountable. If I prefer beauty pages, I want to be shown like Israel and all of these things because I'm not personally interested in that. So the user is held accountable for what is shown on the pages. No, thank you. Even social media have a button that is like the not interested button. If you see a post that you don't like, you can just click not interested, and the algorithm will erase the kind of post. So the info bombing that the proposition house brought is actually held accountable for the users. We believe that social media can be accountable for what they show us, and because the algorithm is based on our opinions and what we prefer. The users is not only responsible for what the social media shows, but also for what they post. As the first speaker said in the framework, the companies already are acting to limit fake news. In the status quo, the users can post whatever they want if they pass the guidelines. And even if they pass the guidelines after they post, other users can report the post. So social media can't be legally accountable for fake news because they are doing everything that they can. Of course, they can do more, and we are saying that they should, but they can't be held legally accountable for that. We have the freedom to post what we believe in, what we like, so we are accountable for that. Some of the users decide to post and spread fake news, not just for the hype or the views, but because they believe in it and want to have a confrontation dialogue. Because let's remember, panel, that social media are not an informational page; they are a confrontational dialogue app. And even if they know that it was fake news, they will still be held accountable for the post and watch and everything. Because social media companies shouldn't be held accountable for the ignorance of the users. And the responsibility of the social media companies isn't to educate them. Social media companies can control what the users believe in. If they believe in something that leads to the spread of fake news, then the legal responsibility falls on the user's choice in what they post and believe. The companies should still try to limit the spread of fake news as much as possible without leading to censorship, and still holding users accountable for what they believe and post. So that's why the Pro House can achieve all of this if they limit the content because of legal problems. Because let's be realistic. If you limit the content, then if you limit the legal problem, then it will limit the content. And that's why I'm never proud of the proposal. Thank you.
Your speech lasted 8 minutes and 10 seconds.
Yes, sorry. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, I'm the third speaker of the proposition team. And I'll start the speech by rebutting some of the things said by the opposition team, sorry. I'm going by chronological order starting from what the second speaker said. First of all, she said that opinions aren't facts. And I mean, on one side this is true. On the other hand, the opinions are based on facts.
So, first of all, they of course wouldn't be connected. At the same time, though, since these are based on fact, opinions can be biased and can be wrong too. It's not a bad thing to admit that you're wrong, but the best thing to do would be backing your own opinions with what you think and what you believe that it's ethically and legally right. You can back an opinion based on assumptions or fake news. In fact, I believe that if your controversial opinion is backed by scientific and legal evidence, then you are even at more reason as to why to believe the things you do. Again, also, you say that backing your opinion with fake news, then you would be responsible for these bad opinions. Again, you wouldn't be responsible because what the motion says is that if we legally sanction these companies, social media companies, by not giving you these fake opinions, these fake news in the first place, then first of all, you would have a win-win situation because this company wouldn't be subjected to having this fake news circulating. So they would gain credibility and fairness above all. And also users would win too because you would surely have the right information to make the right assumptions. Again, controversial opinions aren't entirely wrong. In fact, a lot of times people who have a more diverse and out-of-the-box type of thinking, they can reach more original and useful conclusions than types of people who prefer to use a cookie-cutter method. At the same time, though, you should always be backed by facts. Opinions without the right facts are simply wrong. And that's, again, it's a fact. Another thing I want to say is that, yes?
So, are you actually banning controversial opinions or not? That's not clear.
We never said that we were banning controversial opinions. That's something you started to say from your very first speech, even if we said that fake news aren't the same thing as opinions. We've been saying this from our first speech. Opinions are based on facts. You can ban fake facts, but if your opinion, and if you truly think that your opinion is right, then you would do the right searches and the right questions, follow the right studies to make sure that your controversial opinion is backed by what is scientific and what is legally right. Even more so if you believe that your opinion might not be accepted by most people. For example, I believe in science and in medicine, but if one person is a Novax, for example, most Novax people, it hurts me to say, but they back their opinions with scientific evidence or by saying that there are real things happening in the world. For example, if someone dies from a vaccine, then that's something that happened in the past. It's true. And I respect their opinion, even if I don't believe personally that it's right. Again, right and wrong is different from true or false. Another thing they said is that it would be too lengthy and too difficult to reach conclusions to legally bind these companies because it would take too much time, it would be just a too lengthy process. The first thing I want to say is that in this age, where everything is tied to technology, where everything is run by robots, of course you wouldn't have someone that fact-checks every single post that billions of users make on the internet. But you would have bots or algorithms or even an AI to check these facts. In fact, AI per se is a fake news. Nowadays we have, this is an example I'm making, nowadays we have many fake news circulating about AI, about the dangerous things, about how it's going to steal our jobs and all of these things. The thing is that AI is just a search engine. ChatGPT is not different from Google, in fact. Again, this is a wrong assumption that people make based on the fact that we don't have fact-checking on social media because there are countless studies on this. But most people, your average Joe, will never go and fact-check every single search that they find on the internet. They will find a post about that someone made, maybe even someone famous that has some kind of influence, and then they will go on with their thesis and with their wrongly backed opinions. Another example, Netflix is AI. I've never seen no one say that Netflix is evil because it's an AI when in fact it is. One other thing I want to say is that, and I quote, the second speaker of the opposition team said that we have to be realistic. I want to say that we live in a world that is ruled by laws. You can be in a society without adhering to these laws. By saying that applying more laws to something would worsen the situation is simply an impossible thing. Simply backing legally what is already happening, because the guidelines are already happening and they are something that every different country do to protect their citizens. If we simply legally back these guidelines, if we make sure that the user reports are right, that the bot reports are true, if we are sure that this information that is being spread is right, and if we have the means to also legally bind and scare people away from trying to make false news around, we are just going to improve the status quo. We are just going to say, we are just going to make sure that the information is free, because that's what social media does, free information, right, and especially fair and always right. Okay, one last thing I wanted to say is that also what we are saying, so applying legal guidelines to social media is nothing that's too far from what the reality we have now. Social media guidelines, for example, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook or whatever, are something that is already being done in the past, and it's something that every single nation create to protect their own citizens. You say that guidelines are already there, that you should just suspect what is there. We believe that those guidelines alone are simply useless, that you would need to add this legal binding to them. For the simple fact that maybe not everyone knows this, but to bypass those guidelines, for example on Instagram, you can just change a few letters of words, and of course people will still understand the meaning, but you would bypass the guidelines. For example, writing kill with the number 1 instead of the letter A, for example. Again, you just need to change a few words and the guidelines will be made useless, while with legal bindings you would assure that users wouldn't do this. And again, with legal bindings you would lessen useless user reports that send in overdrive the social media servers, because user reports are subjective and often biased to what the opposition claim is controversial assumptions. So if someone says something controversial and someone else reports them, usually this person gets blocked on social media. Again, with legal bindings, people would think twice about this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chiara. Your time is 8 minutes and 18 seconds.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panel. I want to remind you what the metric of this debate is. The metric is why should we legally bind the companies, and should we really legally bind the companies and held them responsible for the spread of fake news? Okay, one of the main clashes, what can you expect from this speech? I will go through the three main clashes, so legal responsibility and censorship, and I will explain to you why it's not necessary to legally bind social companies. It is really important to start with the fact, with what my second speaker said, so about the accountability and about the accountability and the authoritarian governments. So as my second speaker explained, we are accountable for what we do. What proposition is trying to say is that people don't know what they're doing. People don't know if what they say is true. People don't know anything. So companies should be held responsible. But what I want to remind you is why. I want to remind you that social media are not just informational panel. Like, they are not made just to be informational. Like, for example, journalism is. Journalism is especially made to be informational, but even journalism, it is legally held accountable, but not always as the, like, my first speaker explained it really well. No, thank you. My first speaker explained it really well. Why should social media companies be held accountable for something that users specifically do? Users know what they're doing, and if they don't know what they're doing, that's why they're going on a platform to have a conversation. If we stop that conversation, what we are reaching is just nothing. We are reaching censorship. They are trying to tell us that by deeming fake news, we are still having a freedom of speech. But what they fail to explain is the really hard bonding, is that bonding between fake news and opinion and free of speech. They are trying to say that it's so easy to deem when a fake news is actually fake. Is it that true though? We all know how difficult it is to panel a fake news. How many times has it happened to you to think that something is right for so long and then realize it's actually wrong? Why? Because it's not easy to spot a fake news. It's not always easy. It's really controversial. What the proposition tried to say, they said, no, thank you. They said that opinion are fact. Okay. And they are said that they are trying to ban the fake news, and they're trying to ban. Okay, let's follow that real clearly. Okay, they are talking about fake news, and they say that fake news are different from opinion. But at the same time, they're trying to explain to us with a lot of words why opinion can be controversial, why opinion can be wrong. But that's exactly the same point. So what they are saying is, no, fake news are so abundantly clear to show us, but they are not that clear. As opinion can be controversial, so can fake news. Fake news are, in fact, in many ways, there are opinion, and they can be controversial. So, coming back to the legal responsibility, why would, yeah.
Could you explain to me better why a fake news is an opinion? What you just said that, so could you?
I said that fake news, it is an opinion, and that's what you also said, and
No, sorry, you
go. You, literally, your third speaker just said opinions are fact, and they also said fake news. I will explain to you if you care why fake news are opinion. Okay, fake news is a news. Okay, it's my first speaker actually explained how it's not abundantly clear what a fake news actually is. But anyways, fake news is a news. It's something you are saying, okay, that you believe it's right. You can believe it's right, but it's actually wrong. But if you say something that you know, it's an opinion. It's not abundantly clear. There is no real truth. So like fake news are just like opinion, or even if they're not opinion, they're facts, but people cannot be sure about that. So that's not really important for the debate. Because no, thank you. Because that doesn't mean even if we take into account that fake news are not opinion, why would social media companies be held accountable for the fake news itself? Like, legal responsibility has to be through that person, through the user. What opposition is trying to say is that users have to be held accountable, even if we take into account proposition side on fake news not being opinion, even if fake news were matter of facts, and even if users just went and spread this misinformation, who is spreading the misinformation? The user. So who should be held accountable? The user. Why are we trying to not hold accountable the user, the one that should know the thing they're doing? Accountability is really important. It's something that proposition did not talk to us. Also, another thing I want to remind you the second clashes, which is censorship. They didn't actually really engage with that. They just said that as we have freedom of speech, to hide fake news would not lead to censorship. But that is not true. As my first speaker spent a lot of time trying to explain why censorship is actually something real. Because if we hide fake news, what can we, if fake news are not as clear, if they're not abundantly clear, and if they were abundantly clear, if fake news were abundantly clear, okay, if we could spot fake news that are already abundantly clear to spot, are already deemed away, are already banned. So if something is abundantly fake, if we can say that something is fake, that thing is already banned because we have incentives to ban those things. But if something is controversial, what is the difference between proposition and opposition? If something is controversial, in proposition word, we are banning it. If something is controversial, we are hiding it. We are hiding it from the word, and we're not making people like communicate with each other. But if something in our word is controversial, we actually have a way to communicate and not just ban something that can maybe be an opinion and not be actually a fake news. So in our word, we believe that it's important to redeem fake news, but we do not think it's necessary to have for it to be legally restricted, because the fake news that are abundantly already fake are already banned, and those who are controversial can be banned, because if they were banned, they would lead to censorship, and that wouldn't be a good thing. So in the end, we think that it's important that the user is legally responsible for what they spread and the information that they spread, and it's important to remember that social media are a way to conversate, are conversational spot. They are not made just for information. And that's the end of my speech.
Thank you. Now it's time for Federico for the speech.
Just a second, sorry, I'm just trying to like fix things. Is it weird?
Okay.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1.
The fact itself that this debate revolved around the definition of fake news demonstrates that fake news are not a strictly defined concept, that it's like clear and bluntly defined for everybody. Like this debate, it's the proof that opposition definition of fake news is the one we should need to take into account. Sadly, this debate revolved around a lot around definitions, so I will have to take them into account a lot during this analysis of the debate. So, as replier of opposition, what can you expect? I will bring the main two clashes of this debate, and I will give you a criteria on which should adjudicate this clash and understand why you stand with opposition. I will give you first what the proposition said, later what the opposition said, and the comparative on the two sides. So, let's start with the first clash of this debate. Do companies have a legal responsibility? So, like the criteria in this case is the responsibility actually legal? That's the main part of this debate. That's the main word of the motion that we were given. What we get from proposition is that they should be legally responsible because it incentivizes control over the spread of fake news, which are news that go against an objective truth. In opposition, instead, we push that the legal accountability falls on the users because users have critical thinking in general and they're able to understand when or not what they're reading is a fake news. The main difference is that in opposition world, companies are still incentivized to stop blunt fake news, especially because when they're blunt, to keep the environment in the platform clean. The issue is that the legal responsibility requires the legal responsibility, as providing an extension mechanism, can become controversial when some news is not deemed as strictly true or strictly wrong. As we explained throughout our debate, the point is that not everything that we receive on social media, not every information we receive, tends to be perfectly defined as true or wrong. As in, for example, even in the scientific community, as we explained, where general information are more kind of like based on objectiveness, are always accepted as true by everybody. So on the comparative, the point is that in both words, the best case scenario blunt fake news are stopped. The issue comes from whenever something isn't as clearly fake. What should companies do? Like, should they risk to be sued just to protect the freedom of speech? Probably what opposition pushes that they want, because they have economic incentives that overcome their willingness to protect freedom of speech. So the main mechanism that we get from proposition is that it's easy to discern from fake news, but what opposition pushes instead is that it's not as easy for the amount of information that you get, and it's not as easy because, again, there's no like kind of like a control system to tell me what is true, what is wrong. So the point is that on the comparative, opposition actually thinks that they shouldn't be legal because the legality requires an objective method to judge what is true. So if there is a legal criteria, there must be also an objective tool to control whether or not something is actually true. So let's move on to the second question. In which word is freedom of speech protected? The criteria in this case is the legal binding an instrument of censorship? What proposition pushes that it's actually not that strong, like meaning that they don't really tackle apart our point, but what they say is kind of like opinions aren't banned, just blunt fake news in their word. What opposition pushes is that companies fear to be legally sued by opinions or facts that are deemed by some people controversial or fake. So the point is that on the comparative, this comes against the definition. The point is that being legally binding gives power to the people to sue whenever I don't agree with somebody's information. So if I feel that an opinion is controversial, I would legally sue the company. Therefore, the company would prefer just not to protect freedom of speech, and therefore, you should stand beside opposition.
Thank you very much. Your guys, speech lasts 4 minutes, please.
I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So with me, this debate has finally come to an end. My main job here, we all know, is to sum up all the things that have been said by both my team and the opposition team, and sort of make a balance of all the things, and ultimately show you why, in my opinion, we've won this debate. So, to start with the very beginning, I think the reason why we're here today, and one thing that has emerged, is that we both recognize the real issue of fake news, otherwise we wouldn't be debating this motion. But is in how these fake news should be tackled, whether legally or not legally, and who should be held accountable of those fake news spreading and believable. That is where the main points of clash have emerged. And I think the three main points of clash that we've come in conclusion with in this debate were whether it would be a legal matter or not, accountability, if it falls on the single individual, on the single user, or on the state, and also the little balance between freedom of speech that is limited by censorship. I'm going to analyze one by one. I'm going to give you first the vision of the opposition team, then our view, and ultimately a solution. So, regarding the first point of clash and whether it would be a legal matter or not, well, of course, the opposition team has given you a straightforward answer. No, it shouldn't be a legal matter or not, because they have recognized the responsibility of the social media companies, but they said that this responsibility was only moral, and it was only a moral responsibility of stopping bland fake news. On the other hand, we've tried to give you a different view of this issue on where yes, social media companies should actually have a legal repercussion on when fake news are spreaded. Because, well, generally, this has been said from the first speaker, and I hope we've tried to pass advice on all the speakers, is that we live in a world whose fundament is law. It's like a big building, and infrastructure at the end, the fundament is law. So of course, when something is legalized, it works better, because it puts on paper the duties and the acknowledgements of the stakeholders. So when it is legalized, there is a granted effort of social media companies. If it weren't legalized, of course, in our view that we tried to give to you, these responsibilities based only on morality, only on what's good or not, it could be quite controversial, it could be quite interpretative. But when there's a legal code to follow, that's where there's a granted effort from all the parts. And that's where actually we are going towards a positive solution of really banning fake news. Now about accountability. On one hand, we have the opposition team that has told you that the accountability falls only on to the user, because social medias are not meant to be informational, and also the users are responsible for their own algorithm. On the other hand, we've tried to show you how user instead is not aware always of the algorithm, because the algorithm is a mathematical proof that tries to give you a little bit of everything, but also with info bombing, source bombing, and also the fact that you don't always choose what happens to be on your feed. User is not accountable, it's rather a victim of the whole system of fake news. And now the last point, one about freedom of speech limited with censorship. On one hand, the opposition team has told you that fake news are opinions. They have told you that fake news should be banned, that fake news equals to opinions, but also they've given you the problem that censorship will limit freedom of speech. So really, they wouldn't be banning any fake news according to what they are saying, according to their logic, because if fake news equals opinions, and opinions shouldn't be censored, then fake news shouldn't be censored. On the other hand, we have given you a solution on where fake news are different from opinions. Fake news, which we've defined, are a false event with the intention of making it be perceived, that can be perceived as true or false, and instead opinions that depend on points of views. They are not absolute false or truths, so they can be controversial. In this situation where fake news are censored and opinions are not censored, freedom of speech is ultimately protected. And that's why I think we won this debate. Thank you very much.
My time is 4 minutes, 27 seconds. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.